Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman were one of country music's most celebrated couples for nearly 20 years, and their January 2026 divorce settlement has put a $6.5 million car collection at the center of an asset division the media never thought to cover. They met at a Los Angeles event in January 2005, a celebration for Australians in Hollywood called G'day LA, started dating 6 months later, and by June 2006 were married at the Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on the grounds of St. Patrick's Estate in Manly, Sydney. 2 daughters followed, Sunday Rose, now 17, and Faith Margaret, 15. Nashville became their base, which gave them both exactly what they needed. Keith close to the country music industry that had made him a Grammy Award-winning star, Nicole with enough distance from Los Angeles to maintain some version of a private life while building an Oscar-winning film career that put her net worth at $250 million. Together, the financial press estimated their combined net worth at $519 million, $30 million of which sat in real estate spread across Tennessee, Beverly Hills, Sydney, and New York. Nicole filed for divorce in September 2025, citing irreconcilable differences, and the settlement landed on January 6, 2026, less than 4 months from filing to finished. Tennessee law requires a 90-day waiting period for divorcing couples with minor children, which means the attorneys on both sides moved through a $500 million asset division at about the fastest pace the court calendar would physically allow. Both parties waived their right to appear at the final hearing. A marital dissolution agreement signed the same day covered custody, child support, and parenting arrangements for their daughters. While the tabloids chased every detail of those terms, a $6.5 million collection of cars quietly waited for someone to ask the obvious question about who walks away with what. Start with what that number actually represents in automotive terms, because $6.5 million covers an enormous range of what a car collection can be. This isn't a portfolio assembled by a business manager executing a wealth strategy. Every vehicle in that garage reflects a choice Keith Urban made personally: what to acquire, what to commission, what to drive on an ordinary Tuesday. Nashville radio host Bobby Bones, who has run in the same circles as Keith for years, confirmed publicly that Keith showed up at his house in a Bugatti Veyron and arrived at the Grand Ole Opry in a large orange truck. Neither of those is a curated public appearance. Both are just Keith Urban getting somewhere. He is, by every credible account from people who actually know him, a driver who happens to own exceptional machinery rather than a collector who acquires machines to own them. The Rolls-Royce Spectre anchors the collection and carries the highest profile of anything in that garage, worth around $600,000 and significant as the first fully electric vehicle Rolls-Royce ever produced. Dual motors delivering 577 horsepower, a ride so quiet that Rolls-Royce engineers spent years developing acoustic insulation to replace the sensation the engine formerly provided, wrapped in bodywork the brand has been refining for over a century. The Spectre represents Rolls-Royce making a generational commitment to electric vehicles without conceding a single detail of the experience that made the name what it is. Acquiring one when Keith did, before the wider market had fully processed what the model even was, says something about the depth of attention he brings to this world. The Spectre also generated its own headline before the divorce did, and the story tells you something important. In late 2024, Keith was driving his daughter Sunday Rose to a Billie Eilish concert in Nashville when he scraped the car against a parking curb, causing thousands of dollars in visible damage to the bodywork. What that moment reveals is not carelessness. It's ordinariness. No event, no photo opportunity, no reason for a $600,000 electric Rolls-Royce to be in a concert venue parking lot other than the fact that a father was taking his daughter to a show and reached for whichever car he normally drives. That combination of the extraordinary nested inside the completely routine was exactly what made this couple feel authentic to people who followed them, and losing that shared frame is part of what this divorce actually cost both of them. Next in the garage sits the Ferrari F430 in red, valued between $130,000 and $200,000 depending on the specific car. The F430 occupies a specific place in Ferrari's production history. It represents the naturally aspirated mid-engine formula that defined the brand's road cars for decades, intact and fully realized before a turbocharged era changed the character of the lineup. Among collectors who drive their Ferraris rather than preserve them, well-maintained F430 examples have held market value consistently because of what the car is rather than what it costs. The exhaust note was engineered as deliberately as any other component on the vehicle. Owning one in red, keeping it in Nashville, and putting actual miles on it, which by all accounts Keith does, puts him in the specific category of Ferrari owner the brand has always aimed at and rarely captured cleanly. None of that prepares you for the Bugatti Veyron, and the Veyron is where the scale of this collection becomes impossible to look past. An 8-liter W16 engine producing over 1,000 horsepower, 0 to 60 in roughly 2.5 seconds, and the title of fastest production car in the world at the time of its introduction. What makes the Veyron genuinely remarkable beyond the specifications is the engineering required to deliver that performance while keeping the car manageable on public roads. Tires, brakes, aerodynamic systems, and thermal management all had to be developed from scratch because nothing on the market at the time was capable of handling what the powertrain produced. The car is worth close to $3 million, which means the Bugatti accounts for nearly half the entire collection's value all by itself. Keith drove it to Blackbird Studios in Nashville in 2016, not to a premiere, not to a media event, just to a recording session. And that one detail tells you everything about the relationship he has with these machines. They are transportation. Just transportation that happens to cost more than most houses. And before we get to the car that changes everything about how this asset division actually works, here is what you need to know. There is a 1969 Ford Mustang restomod sitting in that garage that almost nobody in the media has covered properly, and it may be the single hardest asset in the entire divorce to divide. That story is coming up. Completing the rotation are a black Mercedes S-Class in the executive transport role, a Range Rover Sport handling the practical day-to-day Nashville driving, and a Lamborghini Aventador worth between $390,000 and $490,000 that Keith purchased as a gift for Nicole. Nicole explained the situation herself on the record in plain language. Her husband bought her a Lamborghini, and she drives a Subaru. She called Keith a Queensland boy who loves fast cars, described the Lamborghini as a natural fit for him rather than for her, and made clear that reliable air conditioning covers most of her automotive priorities. Urban started driving the Aventador himself. Nicole kept the Subaru. For years, that story lived as an endearing celebrity anecdote about the gap between how wealthy people live and what actually makes them comfortable. The divorce converts that anecdote into a genuine legal problem. Tennessee applies equitable distribution to marital property, meaning the court targets what's fair given the specific circumstances of the marriage, not a mechanical 50-50 division. But gifted assets occupy a different legal category, and the analysis shifts considerably when the facts are what they are here. The intended recipient never took formal ownership of the vehicle. She never drove it. The person who bought it as a gift ended up being the one behind the wheel for years. Those facts don't point cleanly toward any single rule. And the question of which framework governs, the intent at the moment of purchase, or the behavior across the length of the marriage, carries real financial weight at $400,000. Nicole's first husband, Tom Cruise, has assembled a car collection estimated at $50 million over his career, meaning significant automotive assets inside a high-profile divorce are not a new context for the world she moves through. But the specific legal tangle here is genuinely unusual, even by that standard. Now, the 1969 Ford Mustang restomod and why it matters more than its price tag suggests. A restomod is categorically different from everything else in this collection in ways that directly affect how it gets divided. The Bugatti Veyron is a production car, manufactured to a documented specification, sold through a dealer, priced by a market with comparable sale records for attorneys to reference. A restomod starts with a donor vehicle, in this case a 1969 Mustang body carrying one of the most recognized silhouettes in American muscle car history, and rebuilds it entirely from that starting point. Modern suspension geometry replaces the original. Contemporary braking systems take over. An updated powertrain goes in underneath exterior styling that still reads visually as 1969 Mustang, so the finished car carries the visual identity of the classic era with the engineering of something built recently. Estimated value sits between $100,000 and $160,000, making it one of the lower-priced vehicles in the collection on paper. But paper is exactly where the difficulty begins. A restomod gets commissioned rather than purchased, which means the owner makes consequential decisions at every stage of the build process: color selection, interior materials, engine configuration, the specific modifications that separate one example from every other. That depth of involvement builds an attachment that doesn't survive clean asset division the way a production car does. The Bugatti has a functioning resale market. The Mustang has a story, and stories are the one thing that appraisers can't quantify and settlement agreements can't capture cleanly. In divorce proceedings at every level of wealth, cars that carry personal history consistently close last. After the real estate transfers, after the liquid assets divide, after everything with a clean market value has already been settled. High-profile divorces at this financial scale typically move vehicle collections through one of three resolution paths: full appraisal across the entire collection, with one party retaining the physical cars and the other receiving equivalent value through real estate holdings or cash; physical division of specific vehicles between both parties based on negotiated preference; or full liquidation, proceeds split, and both parties moving forward without the complexity of contested personal property. What the reporting on this specific settlement makes clear is that Keith and Nicole reached their agreement in roughly 4 months, which for a marital estate of this size is genuinely fast. Attorneys who accomplish that at $500 million scale don't do it by fighting over every asset. They find the workable common ground early and move the complicated items through without allowing any single vehicle to hold the process hostage. The full property division terms remain undisclosed. Which cars ended up with which party is still genuinely unknown. Decades of high-profile celebrity divorces have consistently demonstrated that clean assets close first. The ones with clear purchase histories, established market values, and ownership records that both sides can agree on without protracted argument. The complicated ones, the gifts with tangled ownership histories, the bespoke commissions with personal histories attached, those close last. The Lamborghini, with its gift history and its years of use by the wrong person, almost certainly sat in those final conversations. The Mustang, with its commissioned build and its story that no appraisal can fully capture, almost certainly sat there beside it. They shared a stage, a life, and a Nashville garage for nearly 20 years. The music continues for both of them, on separate roads now, and the careers that built the $500 million estate will keep generating. Only one of them, though, gets to keep the roles.